Mr. Javed Jabbar has diverse interests in mass media, international and national affairs, the environment, development work, social and cultural issues. He's the chairman and chief executive of JJ Media Private Limited and Project One Limited, and has written and produced in 2008 a cinema feature film titled Ramchand Pakistani, directed by his daughter Mehreen Jabbar. The film has won 5 major global awards and has been invited to 27 international film festivals to date. As part of his voluntary work, he was recently re-elected for a 4-year term as one of the 4 global vice presidents of IUCN, the world's largest environmental organization. He's the founder of the Citizens Media Commission of Pakistan. He's also served as minister in 3 federal cabinets of Pakistan and as a senator for a 6-year term. The ministries and portfolios he has headed include information and media development, petroleum and natural resources, science and technology, and national affairs. He has drafted several progressive laws and policies, including the PEMRA law for private electronic media. 10 books comprising his writings on a range of subjects have been published to laudatory reviews. The Human Rights Society of Pakistan has presented him with a gold medal in 2008 for outstanding voluntary public service. I have never met him before in my entire life. This is the first time I'm meeting Mr. Javed Jabbar, so I don't have a personal anecdote to tell you about him. But I've heard him speak on several occasions, and he has been an institution. Just in the information that he has imparted through electronic media and through the talks that I've heard, I hope we will learn and discover a lot more about him. Please welcome Mr. Javed Jabbar.
I wish it was also updated. It's 40 international film festivals for Ramchand and only 14 books, not 10, so you know. None of which, of course, you've read, and neither will you ever read them. But that doesn't matter. I'm just saying, nice to see you here, all of you, even those I cannot see. You've been cloaked in darkness, whereas you should have been lit up. This is about filmmaking, so why all this invisibility? These innocent souls who've been misguided enough to come here in this rainy afternoon and be locked in. I believe you're not being allowed to leave the premises also, Daniel. You've forcibly captured these innocent souls and you've kept them in here. And I'll also say hello to all the empty chairs, because even though they couldn't make it, mashallah, you had a very good turnout of people who were interested in coming, I believe. But God upstairs and nature had another plan for this afternoon. But that doesn't matter. It's nice to see all of you and not see all of you. But it's above all good to be here at this South Asian Academy for Film and Television. My daughter Mehreen Jabbar had told me in advance some months ago about this very courageous initiative. And I felicitate Daniel, yourself, and your colleagues, and Aisha, and all of those who you're associated with in this enterprise. To see this take place and to make this effort in Pakistan, given the historical background, is most commendable. And it, just makes me also want to felicitate you for taking the interest to come and to explore the possibility of your own association with this academy. This academy, of course, comes only about 20, 30, 40 years too late, but better late than never. I wish we had had such an effort earlier, but der aaye durust aaye. And all the effort and the capital investment, the patience that has gone in to invest in this field is most commendable. It's very unusual. It should have been done by entrepreneurs who have much more capital, I'm sure, than those who have risked their money. And it is most commendable. It's a reflection, I think, of the general capacity of people in Pakistan to do unusual things. And it's so nice to know that there are 28 or 25 people here today out of those who had registered who are interested enough in the subject and the sector of this academy to be here with us. So where do we begin in sharing some thoughts with you about the process that this academy has set out to explore and which you have come to explore? Well, I think history is very important, even though some of it you may already know. But for the record, let's remember that Pakistan before 1947, even though it was an overnight nation state, didn't suddenly overnight discover the need to develop a capacity in film and television. Lahore, before 1947, was a second level film production center, even though Bombay was right at the forefront, Calcutta also, but Calcutta was purely regional, confined to West Bengal. But Lahore was well known as a second film center of South Asia. So we inherited that. And immediately after 1947, spurred by the fact that there was a new country that came into being, fortunately, even Dhaka developed this interest in producing Bengali language cinema or Bangla language cinema, and did fairly well, even though many of you here, I suppose, were born after 1971. But it's important to remember that before 71, East Pakistani cinema, even though it tended to be somewhat like West Pakistani cinema, did produce some examples of socially conscious cinema. And I had the good fortune to travel there in 1970, 69, before the breakup of Pakistan. And one person who did a great deal of work at that time was a young filmmaker called Zahir Rehan, who made a satirical film where the dictatorship of Ayub Khan was personified by the tyranny of a woman who tends to dominate the household and be a very dictatorial person. So finding space within that milieu of a commercial cinema to say something that was politically relevant was one example of how Pakistani cinema, even in East Pakistan, was attempting to break out of the traditional mold that Bombay had set for it. Which means it was not all song and dance, the inheritance that we got, because even though that was the normal cast, the normal structure of a cinema film, there were attempts to reflect social reality and political reality to some extent. The patriotism unleashed by the freedom movement, the injustices of land ownership or feudalism, whether it is in India or this part. So the 1947 to about 1971, purely in terms of cinema, did see some very interesting experiments both in East Pakistan and West Pakistan. And up to 1965, which is a short period, when the war took place with India, the second war, the first war was in 1948 over Kashmir. Unfortunately, in 65, both countries decided to ban. Pakistan took the first step of banning Indian films from Pakistani cinema houses, even though Pakistani films were actually beginning to do very well in Indian cinemas. And we could have developed that potential at that time, but we took the wrong decision. So 65 marks a watershed because protection sometimes is a good thing for cinema, but excessive protection can lead to stagnation and insulation and the worst form of imitation. And Pakistani cinema tended to, now that it didn't have the luxury or the opportunity of competing with Indian cinema, stagnated into becoming imitative of Bombay cinema instead of developing a Pakistani idiom, you know, an original Pakistani idiom, because Pakistan itself was evolving and Pakistan was shaping its own personality. So the cinema could have reflected that search for an identity. But this artificial protection given by the banning of Indian films, which were not too many, nevertheless placed some distortion in the process. The major development in the 60s, the second decade of Pakistan's existence, was the advent of television. First in 1964, in what is today the Expo Center, a great experiment of pilot television, followed by introduction in Lahore and Dhaka, and then coming to Karachi in 1969, 68 and 69. And that began the television age of Pakistan.